I'm not gonna lie to you, I'm a little bit confused as to how it can possibly be Valentine's today already when it feels like February literally started like 5 minutes ago, but here we are. It's the Valentine's Day special, baby. Because I thought, while everyone else is out being wined and dined and falling in love with real people, we can fall in love with fictional characters instead. So let's talk about books. Today, I am going to be tier ranking books that feature a love story. So that means these books will not just be romance books. The criteria here is that the main driving narrative focus and question should be, will they end up together? And the book should focus on a couple. This does not mean the love will always be healthy. Some of these are toxic and doomed and cruel, but we're here to talk about how good the books are, not whether the couple in that book are like relationship goals. That's not the point. So let's get into it and tier rank all of the love stories in literature that I have read. And hopefully you'll find an amazing new book that you can pick up. So here is the table. Firstly, let's go through my categories. I've named these after iconic quotes from Love Island because that just felt right to me. So the lowest of the low is, this book gives me the ick. That means I am repulsed by it, I hate it, I despise it, I wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. Next, we have, I licked her tit or whatever. This is a quote from the most recent series of Love Island where basically someone essentially cheated on their partner by licking someone else's boob, but then he just kind of like feigned indifference over the whole thing by being like, yeah, I just licked her tit or whatever. And so I thought that would be the next ranking. This is for books that I'm like a bit indifferent about, you know? Then we have A Hot New Bombshell Enters the Villa. This is for books that I liked. I just liked them, they were fine. Next up, we have Fanny Flutters. These are books that got my heart racing a little bit. This is an iconic Maura Higgins quote, who at this point is honestly a national treasure. This is for books that set pulses racing. And then the top category, the top tier, is All My Eggs Are in One Basket. And it's this one. Having all your eggs in one basket in like Love Island lore is when you are committed, you've probably confessed your love after knowing them for only 5 days, and you would do anything for them. So these are my top rated books with love stories in them. So let's go. Starting us off with a bang, because there is a lot of banging in this book. It happened one summer. This is going into Fanny Flutters. This one is steamy and sexy and hot, okay? There I said it. It's a romance book where like at first I found the characters horrible and awful, but the character arcs are so great. It's basically about this like spoiled socialite who gets arrested, and then her dad, as punishment, basically sends her to this fisherman town, and she falls in love with a human vessel, this man, and it's honestly really sweet and endearing, but also hot as hell. So that's going in Fanny Flutters. Next, let's do this book that I've actually literally just finished this morning. This is Alone with You in the Ether. I was so pleasantly surprised by this book. I can't even tell you. It was so brilliant. I honestly think it's going up to the top spot because it is so poetically and lyrically written. It feels like every sentence has been really carefully considered. It's a great premise. Basically, these two people meet and they decide to have just 6 conversations, and they just have this connection and this bond, and I honestly just thought it was gorgeous. I love all of the little metaphors, the discussions about bees. It's really sweet, it's really sweet. And we do get some birds and bees too. Do yourself a favor and read this book. That's an act of self-love this Valentine's Day, promise me. I'm kind of just plucking at random here. Let's go with They Both Die at the End. Not gonna lie to you, this might end up in the bottom tier because this book had so much potential. To me, it was such an interesting premise, like people who have found out they have 24 hours left to live. And then it just descends into this really naff love story, and like the couple, the way that they talk, I just didn't really find that believable. It sounded like they were NPCs in a video game rather than actual teenagers conversing. For me, this book was all potential and disappointment. So it gives me the ick, although there is a prequel, which I probably will read because I'm intrigued to see what else the author does with the world that they built. If this book asked me on a date, I would politely decline. Next, we have Honey and Spice. I read this for the TikTok book club, and honestly, I didn't love it. I felt like it was kind of confused about who it was aimed at. It was like a very American narrative set in an English setting, and like at times it seemed to be aimed at an adult audience, and then at other times it seemed to be aimed at a very immature audience. So there was just this real weird disconnect. It's about this radio host who is like warning all the girls at her university against this guy, and then she kind of falls in love with this guy after they have a fake dating little situation. There's this big grand gesture at the end, which I honestly thought was so cringeworthy. And like these two characters were supposed to be cool, but I honestly was like, this is not for me. So I'm actually debating saying it gave me the ick. No, let's go with I'm indifferent to this book, because there were nice elements to it, and Bolu Babalona is a talented author. Speaking of talent, let's go with Open Water. This is the most exquisite love story ever. It's about this man and his relationship with being black in Britain, his relationship with himself and his masculinity, but also a relationship with a woman. And there's music just soundtracks this book in such a stunning way. I underlined so many lines in this book, like my hand was aching by the end of it from literally underlining all my favourite quotes, because there were so many. And I cannot wait for Caleb Azuma Nelson's next book, which is coming out this year. I think he's a really exciting emerging author. And the fact that this is a debut is outrageous, because it's just so good. It's also all written in the second person, which I thought was really interesting. I made it much more vivid. It's literally like someone is talking directly to you, and I thought that was a really intimate and interesting experience as a reader. So I like this book a lot. Now let's go with The AI Who Loved Me. I don't know what I was going through my head when I started reading this book. I'm pretty sure I was like out on a dog walk, and the audiobook I was listening to ended. So then I went on to Audible and just listened to the first free one I found, and this was so stupid that it has to end up in that bottom tier. I'm sorry about it. If this was the Love Island villa, this book would be dumped in episode 1. Heartstopper, of course, is a wonderful book. It's got to go right up there. The whole series is so precious and tender and sweet. I know that some people say it's a little bit of a straightforward and basic love story, but that's kind of the point. I think it's very endearing. I also think it's necessary to have this book in the kind of canon of YA romance because of the way that it depicts such a diverse group of young people, and yeah, it's just heart-stopping but also heartwarming. Memorial by Brian Washington is good, but I was waiting for it to be great. There are some beautiful lines, and it's an interesting idea. So it's basically about this gay couple, and one of them finds out that his dad is seriously unwell. So he flies to Japan to go visit his father just as his mother is on her way to visit them. So his boyfriend and his mum end up living together. That dynamic is super interesting. The dynamic of the couple is also very interesting because they have this kind of open relationship, and their relationship is sort of beginning to crumble as well. But for me, it was just like solid. It was okay. It wasn't incredible. The same, I think, goes for The Night Circus. I did enjoy this book, but I felt like it needed to pick which lane it was trying to be in and run with it, because I felt like it was trying to do a couple of different things and then ended up just being a little bit flat at the end. It's about these two people who work at a circus, and the descriptions of their like tricks and the circus itself are just enchanting and so magical. So those are worth it, but I felt like the love story was a little bit underwhelming, shall we say? And there was no big confrontation, which I felt like this book needed to elevate it a little bit. Book lovers, I feel very indifferent towards. I know that people worship the ground that Emily Henry walks on, but something about this book just didn't really pull me in. The prologue is great because it's basically acknowledging the romance genre and talks about its place within that genre, and I liked how self-aware it seemed like it was going to be. But then for me, the romance just was like a little bit dull. I was just like, I needed a little bit more than this. So I was not a lover of this book, unfortunately. I just feel kind of meh towards it, you know? I think it's meant to be kind of Schitt's Creek vibe. I've never seen Schitt's Creek, but it definitely put the shit in Schitt's Creek. I can't say that. Another Emily Henry book is People We Meet on Vacation. I feel the same way about this one. I don't know, maybe it's something about Emily Henry's writing that doesn't necessarily connect with me specifically, but I always think they're a bit surface level and predictable. So this is basically about these two people who used to go on holiday all the time, and then they have this massive fallout. They decide to go on one last trip together, and of course they realise they're in love. This is not a smash, this is a pass. This book, however, is a smash. A totally unique book is This Is How You Lose the Time War. This is one of those books where I was completely and utterly baffled for the first like 2/3 of this book, because it's a really bizarre concept. So basically it's about these two beings which are communicating from opposite ends of a time war. But the most special part about this book is that they write these letters to each other, and over time you see their relationship develop, and the writing is so sublime. It is beautiful, and for that reason I honestly think it's got to go at the top, because this book has really stuck with me. And that's why I wanted to talk about love stories in literature that aren't necessarily straightforward romance books. I want to talk about those as well, but this is one of those really precious books that belongs in that top spot. All my eggs are in that basket and they are ready to hatch. Normal People by Sally Rooney, of course, has to go up there too. Although this is sad at times and frustrating at times, I think that the miscommunication and the way it's presented is so accurate to the way that real people do misunderstand each other, and how you can be in a right person, wrong time situation at multiple points during your life, and how relationships fluctuate and change and develop. And I just think the characters of Marianne and Connell are perfect. I actually went to Trinity College Dublin this week to get an award, and I was just walking around the whole time like, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it, don't say it. But every part of me wanted to be like, I feel like I'm in Normal People. It was really cool. So I was living my Sally Rooney dream. But before I move on to the next book, I wanted to let you know that today's video is brought to you by the loves of my life, Squarespace. Squarespace is the ultimate platform for building a website for your online brand. There's amazing marketing and analytical tools. You can see what people are enjoying that you're uploading and therefore make more of that content. There's these amazing templates which can help you get started, and then you can customize absolutely everything on your website to make something that is completely and utterly your own. I would highly recommend using the blogging feature, because I think that a blog can help your audience to get to know you a little bit better and see behind the scenes and break down those walls, those boundaries between business and customer. And so if you are looking to build your website, use this as a Valentine's Day treat to yourself, because you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial and then use the code jackedwards at squarespace.com/jackedwards to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. This Valentine's Day I didn't get you a bouquet of flowers, I got you a discount code, baby, and you're welcome. So thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video, and now on to the next book. Good Intentions, I feel a little bit indifferent towards. Again, interesting premise. It's basically about this couple where the guy is dating a girl from Sudan, and he's kind of embarrassed to tell his family that he's dating someone from Sudan. So it's really interesting because it's about racism within a relationship and being ashamed of a partner and how that can affect both parties. And there's this one amazing passage where kind of the climax of the book happens, and that was really powerful. But overall the book just kind of goes round and round in circles and is so long-winded to get to that point. So I think the author had good intentions, but poor execution, unfortunately. Okay, in the words of Lizzo, it's about damn time. Let's whack a Colleen Hoover book in the list. Now, Reminders of Him by Colleen Hoover is honestly not that bad. You might be surprised to hear this from me, but I honestly think that people give Colleen Hoover way too much flack. Like, she honestly is a completely fine writer. She makes writing accessible. Her stories are relatively straightforward, but if they connect with people, then they're important. Sure, this story isn't completely profound, but it's well told. I think Colleen Hoover is a good storyteller. Reminders of Him is basically about a woman who comes out of prison after essentially accidentally killing her boyfriend, and in trying to reconnect with the daughter that she had, who she's never really met, she falls in love with her ex-boyfriend's best friend. So, anyway, I don't know why my brain was glitching so much just trying to explain the plot of this book, but I do think Colleen Hoover lacks a little bit of nuance sometimes, and she kind of uses these ideas like an ex-prisoner as a narrative device rather than kind of unpacking what that experience would have been like. But you know what, with these books, I feel like, you know that TikTok sound that's like, I am cringe, but I am free. I feel like that's her. And honestly, I'm gonna put It Ends With Us in that category too. I think that it's okay. I think it's all right. There are some really stupid moments though. Actually, I feel like that might go into the category below, just because there's elements like writing letters to Ellen DeGeneres, and there's just some silly things in this book which kind of irked me a little bit. So okay, that's actually gonna go one category down. Lie With Me, however, is absolutely stunning. It's this really tender story of a first love that didn't work out, and growing old and still thinking about that person and being reminded of them. And the last page of this book had me bawling. Oh my gosh, it is so beautiful. Now, the OG writer of love stories is of course Jane Austen, and so Persuasion for me has to go into the Fanny Flutters category, because this book has one of the most gorgeous declarations of love in existence. The best to ever be written. You pierce my soul, I am half agony, half hope. Like, who is writing like that these days? Honestly, Jane Austen was in a league of her own. Let's actually go through Jane Austen books, because like Emma is such a wonderful book, and it's kind of about the one character of Emma, but there are lots of love stories kind of within that novel. But I think Emma is one of the best characters in English literature. And then Pride and Prejudice for me is like, it's okay. It's not my favourite of hers, but it is still a banger. If I Don't Have You, unfortunately, was one of the most forgettable romance books I've ever read, and so it has to go in the kind of like indifferent category for me. Yerba Buena too is really dull. I actually think Yerba Buena might even be like gives me the ick, because this book was such a disappointment, such a letdown for me. If I was dating this book, I would ghost it like Casper. One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I liked this book. I feel like it could be here. There's this really rogue scene where two people have sex on the New York subway, which altered my brain chemistry, because that is such a strange thing to write in a book. So maybe it might find its way in there actually. But the book is basically about a woman who is stuck in time on a subway. So she's been like frozen in time. And then our main character falls in love with her on her subway journeys. However, the other thing I will say is that this book also depicts platonic love in a really endearing way. Like the friendships that the main character forms in her apartment in New York City are so special and really empowering, and you know, I think that means it can go up a category. Yeah, I liked that depiction of friendship as well, because often friendships are the great love of your life. Speaking of loves of your life, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is a book I genuinely recommend to anyone who is trying to get back into reading more. Because it's accessibly written, the story is fascinating, the pacing is great, there's twists and turns, the great love story in this book is beautiful. And the scene where someone wins an Oscar and tells someone else not to chip their tooth has stuck with me forever. So that's a great moment, that's a great line, that's a great scene. And so this book can be seen right at the top. Right at the top. The Island of Missing Trees is a fascinating book because it's about a love story but also about domestic politics. So it's set in Cyprus, and we have a Turkish Cypriot and a Greek Cypriot who fall in love in a kind of like Romeo and Juliet, forbidden romance kind of way. We get scenes told from their perspectives, from the perspective of a fig tree that is in the restaurant where they meet, and also from their daughter, and I feel like Elif Shafak is a very talented writer, so I like that one. The Kiss Quotient is an interesting book. This is about a woman who hires a male escort basically to help her to learn more about sex, and it's very sweet. It also features great representation of someone who's neurodivergent, which is quite rare in this genre, so I think it belongs up there. Now let's get onto some books that boil my piss. Honestly, I'm getting mad just seeing them in there. Firstly, Bridgerton, The Duke and I. Now listen, I thought series 1 of Bridgerton was like pretty good, and that led me to reading the book, and this book is terrible. It's badly written. For a start, the author uses all these like rogue, obsolete words in the first half. She's like trying to emulate Jane Austen's writing style and doing it like a parody. And then in the second half of the book, she just completely stops doing that and writes in the most basic prose you've ever read in your whole life. So that lack of consistency was so jarring to me. There is a hugely problematic scene in this book with no redemption or remorse. I feel like there are a lot of weird undertones in this book which were rectified by the TV show, but the book itself is terrible. This is the Great British Rake Off, and no one's getting Star Baker. Next, we have The Love Hypothesis. I thought this book was so stupid, and that just took me out of the narrative completely. It's about a student who falls in love with a professor at her university. Like, she's an adult, but the whole dynamic between them feels so forced and weird, and some of the scenes that are set up are just so ridiculous that it's hard to really be rooting for them. Yeah, I don't know what blackmail this author has over BookTok, but I don't know how this has been recommended so much. And speaking of which, in a similar vein, the Spanish Love Deception. Now, the main deception here is people saying this book is good. Because what the hell was that, bestie? Honestly, it's so awful. It's enemies to lovers, but there is no real reason for them to be enemies. They're just like mad at each other for no reason. Right from the very first line, we know exactly what's going to happen because it's made so abundantly clear that honestly, I've had more tension with a bowl of soup. Like, this is just not engaging at all. They do the like fake dating thing where she takes him to a family wedding pretending to be her boyfriend, and suddenly this man can speak a little bit of Spanish. He's been watching like 3 episodes of Dora the Explorer. He can go, "Hola, amigo," and she's like, "Wow, he's so caring. Suddenly I don't hate this man." I just thought this was so dumb. I'm sorry about it. You made a fool of death with your beauty. Now, if you're using a Florence and the Machine lyric as your title, you know I'm gonna buy your book. It discusses the death of a partner and dealing with that grief in a very interesting way. It then moves on to being about falling in love with the father of the person this woman is dating. And that's wild. So honestly, there's twists and turns in this book, and I was in it for the ride. Red, White, and Royal Blue, I think, is very sweet. It kind of reads a bit like fan fiction about a fictional Prince of England and a fictional son of the President of the United States and how they meet. I think at times it was a little bit simplistic. Sometimes the stakes were so low because you knew everything always just worked out a little bit too conveniently, and as a result the tension kind of just dies a death. But it is a good book and I did enjoy it. Another Casey McQuiston book, this one I just finished. This is I Kissed Shara Wheeler, and this one was just a little bit boring to me, and I didn't really think there was much point to it. Yeah, I honestly think it might end up in the bottom tier for me. It's about this like popular girl at school, she's prom queen, who goes missing after kissing a bunch of people and basically sending them on this wild goose chase to find her, and it just goes on and on and on, and the conclusion isn't really that interesting or satisfying. You know, I was not that into this one. The Hating Game, I feel nothing about. The one thing that intrigued me is the fact that the character has a collection of Smurfs, and I just felt like that wasn't unpacked enough. Like, I wanted to know, why does she have these Smurfs? Like, which Smurfs does she have? Which is her favorite one? Like, honestly, the Smurfs were the most interesting part of this to me, and I felt like that needed more attention. But maybe that's just personal feedback. I don't know, I think I felt like this one was just aggressively average. Call Me By Your Name is going right to the top. Look, this is not a healthy relationship, but the yearning, the descriptions of lust and desire are just so exquisite. Like, you can feel the passion pouring off these pages, and that like obsessive, intoxicating love I think is so fascinating to read about. So yeah, Call Me By Your Name I thought was stunning. On the other hand, we have Rodham. This was traumatizing, sickening, made me consider therapy. This is Hillary Clinton fan fiction, essentially. I feel like I got tricked into reading this by a book club that I joined, and yeah, horrible. There's a scene about Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton having sex, and he's like playing a saxophone naked. It's just so unnecessary. I think that's the main word I would use. I was just like, why did this ever get published, you know? Like, what was the need to publish Hillary Clinton fanfiction? Like, why did we need that? I won't be reading any more politician fanfiction, thank you very much. As if that didn't go without saying. But anyway, The Song of Achilles. holy moly, holy smokes. One of the most beautiful love stories of all time, I think. Madeline Miller came, she conquered, and she left no crumbs, not even a morsel. Again, this is one of those books where the ending is just like devastating and crushing and exquisite. This book is a heart-shaped balloon blown up with so much care and consideration and love. It's so beautifully crafted. You just get completely absorbed into this love story. You feel every emotion that they're feeling, and yeah, I can't recommend this book highly enough. Cleopatra and Frankenstein is a toxic love story. It's basically about this woman who is British living in New York and falls in love with a guy called Frank, and then they marry so that she can get a green card. And that rushed wedding basically just like ruptures their lives and impacts everyone around them, and it spirals and it destroys them, but the writing is so good. There's also great peripheral characters in this book. There's some brilliant one-liners, and again, this is one of those books where I underlined so much. The Course of Love by Alain de Botton I thought was kind of just dull. It's also annoying. Basically, he is like a philosopher, like psychologist, and he talks about this couple who are basically like falling out of love. The author like breaks the fourth wall and interjects and gives like an analysis of what's happening when it's kind of obvious. He's like this omniscient David Attenborough figure, like trying to narrate what is going on and explain it. And it's annoying. It's really genuinely annoying. So yeah, sorry, The Course of Love is not for me. Not good. My Policeman by Bethan Roberts is an interesting love story because it's a love story kind of between three people, but two people who are in love with the same person. One of those lovers is a man, one of those lovers is a woman, and they're both in love with the same guy. And this had me hooked. I think it's really captivating. There's great twists, and I feel like there's some nostalgia attached to this for me because it's set in Brighton, which is where I kind of grew up. So yeah, I do love this book. Acts of Desperation is a great title for this book because it is kind of set in two acts. The first half is about this obsessive, passionate, one-sided love and being utterly infatuated with someone. And then in the second half, she is kind of trying to push that guy away, and it's destructive. Listen, I support women's rights. I also support women's wrongs. And that is why this book is a hot new bombshell. I thought it could have done more, but I thought it was interesting. Definitely really fascinating, and so it deserves its spot right there. 7 Days in June is so great and will leave you thinking about it for many, many more days and many, many more months than just 7. It is so realistic. You really feel every single emotion, every single heartbeat, every single heart flutter. It's about a second chance at love after like 15 years separated, and these two people realize that they're both writers and they've essentially been each other's muses the whole time, and it's very special. 7 Days in June is great. If this book was a box of chocolates, I would eat every last one. And now we're finishing off with two classics. Firstly, Jane Eyre. This is, of course, an iconic book, and it would be an injustice to put it any lower than that. And then North and South, for me, I think is such a brilliant novel. I think it's so underappreciated. It's about a changing Britain, there is beautiful symbolism, but the love story is also really endearing, and I liked it a lot. So that is my finished ranking of all of the love stories in literature that I have read and sometimes adored. Happy Valentine's Day. Thanks for coming on this little literature date with me. Let me know what your favourite love story in literature is in the comment section down below, and I'll be down there looking for some more recommendations because I love reading about love. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. The link is down below, and you can like this video if you enjoyed it. You can subscribe for more from me. All the best, stay in touch, have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you very, very soon. Bye bye!